capacity that exists today. If we were to break down a few of these examples in which Tony romanticizes the past compared to Tony's life during the show, we can identify Tony's issues with modern day society. On the neighborhood front, the old neighborhood lost its Italian footprint because, as we all know, America is a melting pot. Gone are the days of first-generation Italians existing in their own neighborhood. We see New York underboss Butch make this observation in the final episode, where Little Italy is shrinking rapidly before his eyes. We also see Paulie and Patsy lament about their Italian subculture losing prominence during different coffee shop scenes. As far as women cooking for their families goes, Carmela is a character who spent the majority of her adult life being a homemaker, or succumbing to the traditional stereotype that women don't belong in the workplace, and ought to stay at home like Livia and women before her did. Of course, too, with Carm, we see her grimace towards women who branch out from the stereotype and spread their own wings to earn a living, i.e. when Pussy's widowed wife buys a Corvette with her own money, or even oftentimes being jealous of her own daughter, Meta, when she excels in areas that Carm never bothered to. And then last but not least, of course, the nature of how widespread therapy/mental health has become in the 21st century. Tony spends a lot of time remarking to Melfi that he more or less feels the men of today are crybabies. But every now and then, it's revealed to Tony that men have always dealt with mental health. Hesh mentions to Tony that his dad, Johnny Boy, often suffered from the same passing out spells that Tony, and even AJ, also struggle with. So that was sort of a long rant. The thing is, the show is constantly depicting the melting pot, post-ethnic nature of where the country is heading, and how this affects Tony Soprano and his friends and family. To me, that's sort of where the finale of the show's title comes from. But let me know if you have a different take in the comments. And of course, there is a ton of hypocrisy in Tony constantly ridiculing the Wonder Bread WAP. When we see Tony being guilty of the things that he accuses Marigan of doing.
So I wrapped the paper. And there she is. With her head held high and her ears perked
Fuck
up.
happened to Gary Cooper? That's what I'd like to know.
Smiling.
You realize by the time Caitlin's out of college, it'll be like the year 2027 or something?
She takes after you. She won't be out of fourth grade by then. Of course, by that time, she'll be working here, so who gives a shit?
He was a good man, wasn't he, Phil?
He was. I loved him like a brother-in-law.
Leotardo appears to be homophobic to an extreme degree relative to other characters in the show, which is obviously saying a lot. Of course, Phil going through such extreme means to murder Vito does beg the question if he is projecting being closeted via the savage killing of Vito. Personally, I always found that Phil and Richie April's vehement homophobia may stem from their time in the can, perhaps both being victims of sexual abuse or rape. It is true that Phil is a survivor of one or several instances of rape. Perhaps he copes with his trauma by looking to punish Vito for his desire to engage with other men sexually. This might sound kind of ridiculous, but let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, perhaps Phil was jealous of Vito, since if Phil really was gay and sexually assaulted in prison and, aroused by that kind of stuff, he likely will forever associate intercourse with men with being raped in prison. Thus, in Phil's warped reality, pledges to find Vito and then torture him to death. And we see kind of ways in which the show writers are kind of alluding to this, possibly, or just kind of poking fun at, Phil in general just being really homophobic. Like that one time he turns off the bodybuilding competition, which, why is that even on in the first place? It's kind of hilarious.
Can't let your mind dwell on. Turn that off.
And then two, like I've mentioned earlier, he ambushes Vito and is emerging in kind of like a dramatic fashion from the motel room closet, which obviously is a play on coming out of the closet. So make of all that information as you will.
Will you please get dressed? You want to take it for a test drive?
There are several instances on the show where we get glimpses into Tony's dreams. Here we see a wide range of Tony's hopes, dreams, and nightmares, ranging everywhere from his sexual fantasies with Melfi. On top of the fantasies, we more often see glimpses of his fear of death, or anxiety leading up to killing friends of his, most notably Big Pussy.
He was a victim of his time.
Who cares? It's what he did.
He discovered America is what he did. And in this house, Christopher Columbus is a hero. End of story.
There is a large subset of Sopranos fans who lean conservative. I can't say this would surprise many, as I'm sure we all agree that the protagonist, Tony, would certainly identify as such. He often clashes with his son and daughter on political and social issues, who both lean more liberal over the course of the show.
You're dragging me to hell.
What's the matter? What's the matter?
You're dragging me to hell.
Paulie! You had a nightmare, honey.
Of any character in the show, Paulie Walnuts is the only one who basically has his own subplot of constantly looking over his shoulder and obsessing over the paranormal. He is constantly waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares and has an unhealthy obsession with the 3 a.m. hour at night. Paulie's mother is coincidentally a nun who disgraced her oath to God by getting knocked up and conceived Paulie as a result, a fact which Paulie wouldn't realize until the end of the show. Paulie also has his run-ins with apparitions on the show, but more on that later.
Grandma?
There is a scene in an earlier episode where AJ feels Livia's presence in the house while he is home alone. He calls out her name and awaits an answer. The scene indeed has a strange, cursed aura to it. If Livia's ghost does inhabit the house, she would of course be a malevolent spirit, and could be responsible for some of the troubles that would await her son Tony later in the series. Separately, in a scene later on in the series, while Bobby and Janice are having a dinner over candlelight, we see Janice's glass of wine move on its own. Now, I've rewatched The Sopranos probably over 8 times in my lifetime, and I'm always dumbfounded when I discover yet another nod to the paranormal in this show. Whether this was Karen's, or Livia's, or someone else's spirit moving the glass, this is very much up for question.
Yeah. I'd like to make a collect call.
During the 60s and early 70s, Tony Sirico was a member of the Colombo crime family. He was active in neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Bass Beach, and Gravesend. Sirico was known for being tough, sometimes taking things from others, and driving for other gangsters now and then. He was arrested a total of 28 times during his life. In 1967, Sirico was sentenced to spend 13 months in prison for robbing a nightclub. 4 years later, he was sent to jail again, but this time being given a 4-year sentence, of which he only served 20 weeks before he was released.
Things are good. Richie April's in the Bermuda Triangle. All my enemies are smoked.
Unlike other crime dramas that this show is often compared to, The Sopranos does not have one main antagonist or villain. Prior to Nancy Marchand's death, who played Tony's mom, Livia, on the show, it was initially meant for Livia to have a major role well after her untimely death. Into season 3, she was meant to testify against Tony in court, aiming to have her son thrown in prison. Of course, we experienced the show largely through the lens of Tony, who really was the first anti-hero ever in television, at least to succeed at this level and this scale. Personally, I would argue that if one needed to identify an antagonist of The Sopranos, it probably should be Tony himself.
And when the last one goes, we become the old folks.
What are you talking about? We're still fucking kids, for crying out loud.
Don't you believe it, Tony? When the last one dies, it signals the beginning of the last stretch for us.
This was the name of a TV commercial released by the Yes Network, in which James Gandolfini appears. The message of the commercial, humor elements aside, is that life is short. Indeed, Gandolfini passed away shortly after this commercial aired, passing away at the age of 51 in Rome. It's commonplace for only a little over 1/4 of television pitches to make it from the pilot stage into the series state. This is to say that most series pitches get nowhere. With that said, it's clear why there are usually plenty more production mistakes in TV pilots than there are later in a television series lifespan. The Sopranos pilot suffers from many common pilot mistakes, i.e. the fleet of film crew being visible in certain shots. However, I'll get into the more interesting ones from a character point of view. For one, Meadow is depicted much younger in the pilot. There are stuffed animals all over her bedroom. Secondly, Tony mispronounces Hannibal Lecter as Hannibal Lecture.
Well, you think I was Hannibal Lecture before or something?
Carmela looks very different. Can't quite put my finger on this one. Something about her makeup, I think. And of course, James Gandolfini was by far the thinnest we see him appear in The Sopranos in this pilot. From this point on, he puts on a considerable amount of weight. Probably to give himself a more physical presence to, more strongly portray the Tony character. And as many fans are also well aware, He obviously has a much thicker accent after this pilot. Also, Satriels goes by a different name. The cat in the back office of the Bing is hyperfixated with the portrait of Christopher in the last episode of The Sopranos. Some fans believe that the cat is Christopher's past lover, Adriana, reincarnated. There are indeed supernatural elements that manifest in this show, but there isn't much stronger evidence than the cat staring at the photo. I guess also if you want to count that one moment in the episode as a hit, where she's meowing. Walden Casado in the scene says that the cat stares at the photo daily. There is definitely something intentional going on here with this, but just not sure that it's aid. Paulie does explain to Tony that the picture has been moved multiple times, so it couldn't be that the cat is detecting like some rats behind the wall or something. Let me know in the comments how you attribute the significance of the cat, or if the cat is aid, or if the cat is something else, etc.
Out in a bad rap. We become synonymous with dud,
Hey, I know this guy.
failure, bust, fiasco. Anything defective is a lemon.
The actor who plays Bobby recorded some audio for a few McDonald's commercials, where he reads his lines with a familiar delivery to that of his mafia persona in The Sopranos. He makes corny jokes like,
Dad. People think I'm sour, but what can you expect when you consider my family tree?
Commendatore.
David Chase, at the time of recording, is a 77-year-old man. Shortly after The Sopranos ended in 2007, the director of the series kept quiet about revealing concrete details to the public, and instead deferred to fans to speculate until the end of time on key what-ifs that the show never definitively spelled out in the show. However, in 2021, during an interview on the Many Saints of Newark film, Chase would forego his earlier stance on leaving show's details open to interpretation, and strongly inferred that Tony was killed in that final season. This didn't really jive well with many fans of the show. Though, as a fun aside, during that same interview discussing Tony's death, Chase says around the year 04-05, he had a different scene in mind to shoot. Tony drives back into the Lincoln Tunnel, goes for a meeting with Phil Leotardo, and he's killed. I don't think you were going to see the deaths, but you were going to know that he was dead. Oh, and he also revealed in a Talking Sopranos episode in 2021 that Ralphie did in fact kill Pyomai for the insurance money. Again, revealing details like this does ruin the ambiguity of one of the show's most discussed subject matters. Many fans of The Sopranos do go as far as to ignore Chase's remarks, since these are in such stark contrast to Chase's earlier philosophy and vision of the show's defining moments shining due to their intrinsic ambiguity. The next few bits of the iceberg, in addition to some later on, will cite recent remarks from Chase on the show, which takes us to the next subject.
My poor baby. My little boy.
This bit on the iceberg suggests that, despite Ralph being a highly volatile and loose cannon, once he experiences the tragic death of his son, this would have marked the beginning of a new, less ethically bankrupt Ralph Cifaretto. This is one of those series that are unfalsifiable though, considering Ralph was murdered shortly after his son passed away at the hands of Tony. In 2021, in a Talking Sopranos episode, it's also worthy to note that Chase adds that, in addition to the horse, the main contributor to Tony murdering Ralph is due to Ralph beating his pregnant girlfriend, Tracy, to death earlier in the show. Something that stuck with Tony, as Tracy comes to mind to Tony a few times after her death. In particular, there is a scene in Tony's kitchen in which he sees Tracy and his daughter Meadow. I believe Tony draws a comparison due to Meadow beginning to mature as a young woman. Tracy too was an extremely young woman, so not sure that Ralph was on the verge of going on a positive streak the rest of his life, considering we can safely assume that A,
you brought this on yourself with that girl.
A, she was a hooah. B,
we can safely assume that A, he wasn't going to leave his crew, and B, he wasn't going to stop using cocaine, and C, if he can kill a horse to make money via an insurance fraud scam, yeah, in summation, I mean, I don't really think teaching an old dog new tricks applies for Ralphie.
Your aunt, the nun, was your mother.
some GI knocked her up during the war. Russ. Worst thing, I'm not who I am.
Dr. Russ Fagoli appears in that episode where Carmela hosts a cookout for her father, Hugh. You'll recall this was during the time when Carmela and Tony were dabbling in the divorce. Anyway, Dr. Russ Fagoli is seen here, and in addition to other moments in the show, the internet has pieced together a few odd coincidences that point to a familial connection between the two. Most of these coincidences exist in Season 4, almost as if the screenwriters wanted to add a hidden subplot to the scene as an Easter egg for the hardcore fans. These are the facts. Number 1, a few days prior to Hugh's birthday party, Carmela invites her parents over for dinner. Once Hugh hears that Russ will be in town, he makes a joke about his having crabs during his time with the Navy. Number 2, when Paulie's mom reveals the truth of her and Paulie's relationship as mother and son, his mother relays some cryptic details to who his father is. She doesn't say anything really before Paulie storms off in a fit of rage, but she does relate to him that she was knocked up during World War II by a soldier named Russ. Number 3, they are the only two characters in the show that suffer from prostate cancer. There is a scene in which Paulie's doctor actually asks him over the telephone if he's aware of his father, in particular, also suffered from the cancer. Russ reveals to Hugh at Hugh's cookout party that he had his prostate undergo radiation.
This is the access point. Let's get rid of that taken before it opens a path into the Cloud Arc.
So yeah, make of this info what you will. An abandoned subplot, or maybe just a fun connection the showrunners decided to throw in as a harmless nod to the overall world of Sopranos lore. Let me know what you think in the comments.
I can't be bothered. Bro, what the f- Joo. Moi, ihan hetki. Let's go. GG's.